Hello and welcome to the editorial analysis of The Hindu. Today we shall be discussing the editorial of the 13th of March. So coming to the first article, to serve the government. Now the context here is with regards to the relevance of the Official Secrets Act. Now this act was something that came into existence in the year 1923, and many questions are what are continuously asked, that is this act still relevant for India, or is there a need for repealing this act? So this is something that is very important vis-a-vis the Official Secrets Act. Also, what is important in the context here is that what has happened recently is an expose vis-a-vis the Rafale deal, and after this expose, especially by several newspapers including the newspaper Hindu, the Attorney General had threatened that the government is considering to take action against these media houses under the Official Secrets Act. So again, this act is what becomes important in the context of the Rafale expose. So that is what is the entire context. Now coming to the issues that have been discussed. Now the first issue is with regards to the Official Secrets Act itself. Now as I told you, it was an act that came into being in the year 1923. So obviously this is an act of the British India. It is a British India enactment. So obviously it is going to have very stringent provision, because the British India wanted to curb the press and the rising media at that point of time in India. But the issue is that it was expected that at the time of independence, either this act would be repealed or at least its laws would be made less stringent, but this is what has not happened. Rather, in the year 1967, the laws were made even more stringent. For example, Section 5 of this particular act, which deals with wrongful communication, and Section 8, which deals with the duty of giving information as to commission of offences. These are two sections which the editorial discusses were made further strict under this act. So that is one thing that has been analysed. The second issue which has been discussed is with regards to the frequent misuse of this act. Now, such kind of acts which have a tendency to be misused are often misused by the governments. Responsible action vis-a-vis these acts is something that is not taken. Not only is this seen vis-a-vis the Official Secrets Act, this was also seen in the Sedition Act. So these are acts which need to be repealed so that their misuse is something that does not happen, which at present is something that is happening. Even the threat by the government is being perceived as a misuse of this act. So this is something that is important, which has been analysed. Another thing which has been analysed in the editorial is the Goswami Commission. Now, you should know something about this commission. This commission was something that was constituted by the Janta government. It was supposed to officially be the second press commission, but that did not happen because before its report was taken, this commission was dissolved in the late 1970s, precisely in the year 1979 by the Indira Gandhi government. This commission was done away with. So this was a commission under Justice Goswami, and this commission had outrightly called for the repeal of the Official Secrets Act, but its report was never accepted. So that is something that has been highlighted in this editorial. The author himself was a part of the Goswami Commission. Now, whenever such kind of topics are what we have to answer in UPSC, suppose a question comes on the Official Secrets Act. So if we give a mention of these kind of commissions, if we can remember these commissions, then definitely this is a point that is in our advantage. It gives a good impression. So I would suggest that students should try and remember these commissions. And it is rare to find about these commissions because this was a commission that was not an official commission, because its report was something that was not accepted. So this is what is the importance here. The next issue which has been discussed is with regards to the Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution. Now, this is the fundamental right of freedom of speech and expression, and it is from this particular fundamental right that the freedom of press is what is derived. So, if this fundamental right is what is there and the freedom of press is something that is guaranteed by the Constitution, then there is no right for any government to in any way curb that freedom, and that is what has been analysed here. This is the political aspect of the Official Secrets Act. Another thing which has been discussed here is the role of the press. Now here the editorial first and foremost makes a distinction between the press and the media. The editorial says that the press is a better institution, but we cannot buy such views outrightly from the editorial. So the role of the media at large is somehow to serve the governed and not those who are governing. So it is in this light that the media has to play a responsible role towards the citizens. So how is it that the government can choke the media or curb the media using such kind of threatening acts like the Official Secrets Act, which the government has done even today? So in light of the role of the press, that is to serve the governed, it is important that this particular act be repealed. So that is one thing that has been analysed. Another issue which has been discussed here is with regards to the global trend. Now the global trend at present is that of greater transparency, less secrecy. It is the era of information. So all over the world, what is seen is that the governments are taking a step back and they are ensuring that more and more information be in public public domain. Even the RTI in India that has been implemented in the year 2005 is a case in this direction. So this is something that is important, that both globally as well as nationally, the trend is of public being the sovereign. It should have all the information. So in that line also, Official Secrets Act should be repealed. Another thing which has been discussed and which is important is with regards to the International Covenant on the Civil and Political Rights. Now, this is something that was adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations in the year 1966. And it was also that India ratified it under the Janta government in the year 1979. So if India has ratified this particular act, then it is vital that India follows the principles of this particular act, which includes the right to freedom of expression, and as a result of which India should imbibe and uphold the ideals not only of the Constitution of India but of its international commitments, is what is being argued. But what is happening in India is that despite the fact that India has ratified this particular convention, what India is not upholding the ideals of this particular convention, and successive governments are misusing their rights under the Official Secrets Act, is what has been highlighted here. Now, if you remember, previously also we had discussed an article on the Official Secrets Act. So this becomes an important question for this year, and that is the relevance. Now, coming to the next article, final showdown. Now, the context here is with regards to the defeat of the Islamic State. This is something that is appearing imminent. It is being called, or internationally it is being declared, that the Islamic State is just on the verge of its defeat. So some issues are what become important in this backdrop. The first issue is with regards to the territorial caliphate. Now, you should know here that at its peak, the Islamic State had huge territories in Iraq and Syria, and the area under Islamic State was almost equivalent to the entire area of Great Britain at one point of time. But now this is something that has shrunken. The territorial caliphate has finally been shut down. It has been defeated, and now there is only an area of approximately half square kilometer is what is there with the Islamic State. So definitely it has been defeated in some sense. The second issue which has been discussed here is with regards to the siege to Baghouz. Now here, this is the last siege that is going to happen by the forces that are fighting against the Islamic State, and this is going to be the final nail in the defeat of the Islamic State, is what has been highlighted here. Here you should know the forces that are fighting. The first is the Syrian Democratic Forces that are against the Islamic State, and the second are the Kurdish-led rebel groups. So these are the forces that are fighting against the Islamic State, and this Kurdish-led rebel group is what is supported by the US. So this is something that you should know about the forces that are fighting against Islamic State. And this is something, the siege to Baghouz, I have mentioned it because this has been written in the editorial, and somehow some part of it, if we mention, then it shows us some details that we have studied is what is reflected in our answers. Sometimes it gives a good impression, so you can try and remember these details. The third issue that is important is the issue of refugees. Now, this war is something that has been a long drawn war, and it has been estimated that approximately 60,000 people have left the Islamic State occupied area. So this is a huge number, and this has generated a lot of refugees. So the rehabilitation of these refugees is what needs to be focused on, is what has been discussed. The other issue is with regards to the defeat of Islamic State. Now, definitely it is imminent. The territorial caliphate is what has been destroyed. But what is being here discussed in the editorial is that this full-fledged defeat is something that cannot be confirmed, as the Islamic State is an insurgent jihadist group, and this insurgency is something that can again rise. And what has been analyzed here is that these Islamic State, the terrorists under Islamic States, have established their cells across Syria and Iraq, and especially they are taking advantage of the vast desert stretches in Syria for their hideouts, and this is something that was in the past also followed by the Al-Qaeda. So this strategy is something that does not ensure that complete defeat is what is going to happen. Rather, there is a chance that it could anytime resurge as they will continue to be operating. So this is what has to be focused upon, is what has been highlighted. The next issue, which is very, very important, and this is a key word, which is about the geopolitical and the sectarian minefields. Now, if this is an insurgent group, there is a possibility that this insurgency is something that can again rise. So what is important is that these geopolitical and sectarian minefields, from where the Islamic State could exploit the youth for its re-emergence, are something that are checked upon and they be curbed, and there should be a prevention of development of these minefields, is what has been mentioned in the editorial. The next issue that has been discussed is with regards to Turkey. Now, what is happening here is that Turkey is wary of the rise of the Kurdish rebels within its territory. This is because the Kurdish rebels in Turkey are getting their support from the Syrian Kurdish fighters, and these Syrian Kurdish fighters are getting their support from US. So this is something that makes this issue of defeat of Islamic State and the victory of the Kurdish fighters of Syria, their victory of these Kurdish fighters in Syria is something that is not in Turkey's interest, because they are going to ideologically support the Kurdish rebels in Turkey. This is one cause of concern. Another thing which has been highlighted is the need for a political solution. Now, what the editorial is discussing is that if a situation happens that the Syrian Democratic Forces start fighting against the Kurdish forces after, see, collectively they have defeated the Islamic State, but after the defeat of the Islamic State, if there is again a war where the Syrian Democratic Forces fight against the Kurdish forces in Syria, and also Turkey starts supporting the Syrian Democratic Forces to defeat the Kurdish forces, then what is going to happen is then there will be again a civil war in Syria, and peace is something that is again not going to come to Syria, and this might be a breeding ground for the re-emergence of Islamic State is what has been discussed. So what is important is that a political solution be given for Syria itself, for Turkey for that matter. So this is one thing that has been analyzed, and this is an important analysis. Another issue which has been discussed is with regards to US withdrawal. Now for long US has been interfering in this war, so even the US withdrawal should not be sudden, rather it should be a planned and a calibrated withdrawal, so that the situation improves and there is not a sudden vacuum that creates a re-emergence ground or a ground for further civil strife in Syria. So that is what has been analyzed in this entire article. The topic is important vis-a-vis international relations, so that is going to be the relevance. And that's all for today. I thank you all for watching the video.